Hey, Pastor Steve Waldron here. Got my new July 2019 issue of Acts and Facts in, and I just wanted to go through. It's got a great article in here on 5 global evidences for a young Earth. So I'll show you that. It's by Jake Herbert, PhD, and it's some things, I've presented them in other videos, a lot of them, but it's just good to have them just succinct here. And obviously there's a lot more than 5. But these are a very good 5. So let me just show you this too. They've got their little children's books. I think that'd be a good thing, for grandparents to buy children, Sunday schools to buy for their children, and those type of things. So I'm going to be doing quite a bit of reading from this. So, I'll try to intersperse with things and not just read the whole thing. So continental erosion, that's number 1 of a global evidence for a young Earth. Okay, both secular and creation researchers have long noted that the continents are eroding much more quickly than expected in secular thinking. So erosion is occurring so rapidly that the continents cannot be hundreds of millions of years old, let alone billions. Likewise, salt is entering the ocean so quickly they cannot be more than 62 million years of age. So a lot of things, just a few months ago, researchers, Darwinian researchers discovered that everything arose basically spontaneously, all life, between 100 and 200,000 years ago. That made the news for about one day, and then it was taken off the news. So we'll keep going here. North America is being denuded or eroded away at a rate that could level it in a mere 10 million years. Or to put another way, at the same rate 10 North Americas could have eroded since Middle Cretaceous time, 100 million years ago. This 10 million year estimate is comparable to the 14 million years that creation scientists calculated would be needed for all the continents to be planed down to sea level. Skeptics have criticized this argument, saying that it naively assumes erosion rates that have been perfectly constant over time. They also claim it fails to take into account factors such as mountain building and lava flows that can replace some of the eroded material. Fair point. Yes, the above calculation did assume a constant state of erosion, but only to get a ballpark estimate, not to obtain an exact answer. Secular geologists have performed more sophisticated calculations that take into account factors such as climate, slope of the terrain, etc. And these calculations still yield erosion rates fast enough to plane down the continents in just tens of millions of years. And all of these are sourced, by the way. Let me just show you the references that Mr. Herbert uses. He's got a PhD in physics from the University of Texas at Dallas. So down here, my bottom left hand, Sister Fran is so good with that camera, and she will show you that this is, so this would be, similar to a peer-reviewed article, and it is referenced. It's not just the ramblings of somebody, so to speak. It's somebody that's actually saying this. And, some of them would be from secular journals, maybe a lot of them. So here we go. Can't mountain building and tectonic uplift replace the eroded rock? And couldn't old rocks have possibly been protected from erosion by younger overlying rocks that were themselves later eroded away? Can't these factors explain the survival of the continents? No. There are a number of problems with these arguments, but the easiest way to see they don't work is to recognize that landforms exist that even uniformitarian geologists believe have been exposed to surface erosion for hundreds of millions of years. An astonishingly long history of subaerial or open air exposure, yet these landforms still exist. Paleographic reconstructions indicate that parts of the Australian continent have been subaerially exposed for hundreds of millions of years. Some landforms and regolith are demonstrated to be at least 300 million years of age, but their persistence at or near the surface is inconsistent with long-term denudation rates based on cosmogenic nuclides and apatite fission tract thermochronology. In fact, very old landforms are so common that geologists even have a name for them: paleoforms. So, and here's a secular geologist says this: paradoxically, however, none of the mechanisms that have been proposed to explain the survival of paleoforms hold in southeastern Australia. These instances may well be typical of large parts of the interior of tectonic plates, and a revision of widely held estimates of model rates of denudation seems required. Human agriculture would increase erosion rates. Could prehistoric erosion rates have been lower in the past? Yes, but only by a factor of 10 or so at the most, which clearly doesn't solve the problem. It'd be 100 million years. Despite anti-creationist claims, continental erosion is still very much a valid young Earth argument. And so is topsoil depletion, that in just a very short order, all topsoil will be gone in the world. So number 2, this is a shorter one, is ocean salt accumulation. Some of the eroded materials contain salt, which is continually being added to the world's oceans. Once dissolved in the oceans, the salt separates into sodium and chlorine ions. Creation scientists, Drs. Russell Humphreys and Steve Austin, used the current amount of sodium in the oceans to calculate how long it would take, starting with a salt-free ocean, for the world's oceans to achieve their present degree of salinity. They used conservative rates of salt input and made allowances for mechanisms that remove salt from seawater, such as sea spray. They found that the oceans could be at most 62 million years of age. That's the oldest oceans could be. Now, I do want to remind you, this is a free magazine. Go to icr.org, I think it is, and you will get it. Punch in Institute, Google Institute, icr.org, Institute Creation Research, or DuckDuckGo it, or whatever you use, and you'll find it. All right. In fact, revised measurements show salt is entering the world's oceans even faster than Humphreys and Austin thought. This further lowers the maximum age. A sodium-containing mineral called albite removes sodium from the oceans when it forms. So one anti-creationist claimed this fact and validates these results. It was good for free stuff. Yet Humphreys and Austin had already considered this possibility. Albite decomposes in cool water, replacing the exact same amount of sodium that it removes. So over millions of years, it would have zero effect on the sodium content of the world's oceans. It'd be net zero. Now, the Earth's magnetic field, this is a real conundrum for old Earth people. Evolutionary geologists, this is number 3, claim Earth has a magnetic field for billions of years, yet they have no idea how this is possible. As noted by one geophysicist, we do not understand how the Earth's magnetic field has lasted for billions of years. We know that the Earth has had a magnetic field for most of its history. We don't know how the Earth did that. We have less of an understanding now in 2014 than we thought we had a decade ago. The secular scientist's problem is their belief that Earth is billions of years old. Magnetic fields are produced by electrical currents, yet these currents grow weaker over time. To maintain such a current would require an electrical generator, a dynamo of some kind within the Earth's interior. But how such a generator would form naturally. Even after a century of research, secular scientists still don't have a workable dynamo theory. The problem worsens. Based on historical measurements, we know Earth's magnetic field is losing 50% of its energy every 1,400 years or so. It's got a 1,400-year half-life. Even if we ignore past reversals of the field, which would have drained the energy even faster, Earth's magnetic field can only be about 20,000 years old at most. If we're older than this, the electrical current required to power such a field would have to be large enough to melt Earth's crust and mantle. Clearly, such an immense magnetic field would have been incompatible with life. Of course, a weakening magnetic field isn't a problem for biblical creationists, since a decaying electrical current within Earth's core could maintain the magnetic field for 6,000 years or so that have elapsed since creation. Now, the next two are fascinating to me, especially this next one. Radiocarbon, because everybody's heard of radiocarbon dating. Also noted as carbon-14 is an unstable variety of the carbon atom. It's produced from atmospheric nitrogen when energetic charged particles from space enter the atmosphere. Every living thing has some radiocarbon in it. When it dies, its store of radiocarbon begins decreasing as the radiocarbon transforms back into nitrogen. Radiocarbon decay occurs so quickly that even the most sensitive scientific instruments shouldn't be able to detect any radiocarbon born in a sample even 100,000 years old, much less a million years old, millions of years old. Yet radiocarbon is constantly and consistently found in coal, oil, natural gas, and dinosaur bones, which are said to be many millions of years of age. Radiocarbon has repeatedly been detected in diamonds, which are supposed to be billions of years of age. So they shouldn't be there, is the thing. Secular scientists are aware of these results and try to argue that the detective radiocarbon is new radiocarbon that is somehow contaminated or introduced into the sample. However, the result is so widespread that the contamination excuse quickly wears thin. Creation critics have also argued that the radioactive decay from uranium could transform nitrogen impurities within a nearby sample into radiocarbon. However, scientists had already considered this possibility and showed that it was woefully inadequate explanation for the measured radiocarbon, which is fascinating. I tell you what else is fascinating is that we, mankind, can create diamonds in a few hours. And they're saying it's going to collapse entire economies because there's many countries in the world that a large part of their economy is based on diamond mining. And if we can just create diamonds in a laboratory, that totally changes everything. Okay, lastly, 5 proofs and evidences of a young Earth is helium and old zircons, not cubic zirconium, old zircons. Uranium impurities in zircon crystals produce both helium and lead through radioactive decay. Creation researchers examined zircons from granite within a borehole drilled at Fenton Hill, New Mexico. Assuming constant decay rates, one would conclude, based on the amount of lead in the zircons, that the crystals are 1.5 billion years old. Yet just as helium leaks out of a balloon, helium also leaks or diffuses out of zircon crystals. Although this leakage is much slower than from a balloon, it still happens relatively quickly. Leakage rates for gas to a particular substance depend on something called diffusivity, which varies with temperature. Creation scientists hired an expert to measure how much helium remained in the Fenton Hill zircons. They estimated the diffusivities that would be needed in order for the observed amounts of helium to be retained within zircons for 1.5 billion of years as for just thousands of years. They then hired a respected laboratory to actually measure zircon's diffusivity. Before the experimental results were known, creation scientists postulated or predicted in print that the results would agree far better with young Earth creationists than old Earth expectations. All right, the prediction was a resounding success. In order for the observed amounts of helium to be retained in the zircons for 1.5 billion years, the actual diffusivities would have been 100,000 times lower than what was measured. Now, of course, they would say, well, diffusivity rates were different in the past, but that goes against their uniformitarian worldview that everything basically continues the way it always has, with some catastrophic interruptions. So depending on whether one uses the helium or the lead in the zircons as a clock, one could argue that the zircons are either billions of years or just thousands. The disagreement between these two clocks is itself an argument for accelerated nuclear decay. This invalidates the millions of years coming from radioisotope dating. Moreover, one does not expect accelerated nuclear decay to affect the fusion rates. So this is also an argument that the zircons are just thousands of years old. Apparently, sensing the strength of this young Earth argument, anti-creationists have vigorously attacked it, but not convincingly. It's ironic that creation critics claim creation scientists never make predictions, but when we do make an undeniably successful one, they act as if successful prediction is irrelevant. Man, that's true. Okay, so helium in old zircons, surviving radiocarbon in old specimens, ocean salt accumulation, Earth's magnetic field, and continental erosion are 5 of these global evidences for a young Earth. Let God be true, every man a liar. Just believe the Bible. It worked. I'm thankful for the Word of God. I believe God's going to take over the world with the gospel of Jesus Christ. God bless you. I love you in Jesus' name.